I've tried to use a lot of illustrations whenever I do this particular series or if I'm preaching a sermon. But I can remember as I talk to people and they'll come to me sometimes and they'll say, I remember when you gave this particular illustration or when you did this particular thing. I know one time when I was in Rock Hill, we were doing some construction and I had a 12-foot ladder up on the pulpit area. And as I was sitting there watching the electrician do his work that week, I said, well, you know, maybe I could use that ladder somehow as an illustration. And so it dawned on me how to do that. And so I've actually preached my message from the very top of that 12-foot ladder. And I had people that would tell me later, oh, I remember that time you climbed that ladder and preached your message. There's another time when I was talking about Jonathan and David in the Bible, and how David shot arrows into a field to send Jonathan a message. And so I practiced all week with a bow and arrow, and I put a little styrofoam thing on the end of the arrow so if I hit somebody it wouldn't hurt them. But I practiced shooting the arrow down the aisle, and then later people would come to me years later and say, well, you know, I remember that time when you shot those arrows during your morning message. And anytime they would tell me about an illustration, I would say, can you tell me what the sermon was about? And they say, well, I have no idea what the sermon was, but I certainly do remember the illustration. So there are times in our life where illustrations and things that happen in our life speak louder than any other thing that might be going on. Well, my name is Richard Coleman. I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's great to spend just a few moments with you today. Been looking at the life of Moses. I was reading in Deuteronomy, and it talks about as Moses comes to the end of his life. And they say that the very end of Deuteronomy, that it was Joshua who wrote the last few paragraphs. The gentleman that was going to be the next leader, that he was the one that wrote and said that Joshua was like one of the greatest guys that it ever was. The Bible tells us that Moses was 120 years old, and that he still could see well. He still had good physical health. God allowed him to be strong right up to the end of his time. And then God said, it's time for you to go home. Your job is done. It's time to pass the torch on to the next person. And whenever I think about that, I kind of go back in my mind to when Moses started. You know, there in Deuteronomy, they say he was the greatest prophet that there ever was. But you know, if you go back to the beginning of the story there in Exodus, what you find is Moses saying, I can't do this. I'm not a leader. Pick somebody else. You know, he told God, he said, I have a stuttering problem, and I'm not going to be able to speak for you, and all kinds of excuses that he came up with. God took him from there. At the end of the journey, he was known as the greatest prophet that there had ever been. As extraordinary as the life of Moses was, and all the people that watched his life and saw the example that he set and was able to actually gather their faith in God because of the faith that Moses had. The work was not finished when Moses died. They had gotten to the edge of the promised land, but the work was not finished. I think it's sometimes that we might look at the older generation and say, well, you know, they're doing the work, or or they've done all of this and everything is going to be fine, but that's not the way it works at all. You see, we have a generation that lives for God and works for God and maybe builds a church and works hard and whatever it may be, but there comes a point in the time when that next generation has to pick up the torch, or maybe in Moses' case, pick up the staff and be able to move forward. It's so easy for us to say, I can't do that. I can't be the person that my mom and my dad were. I can't be the person that that pastor was, or that missionary was, or that individual in our church was. I can't be that person. Well, if that's what you're saying, then you're talking just like Moses did whenever God first laid his hand on him. So how important it is. I don't know where you are in your life, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what challenges you face. But understand that the greatest prophet of all time, he started out questioning whether or not he could follow God's will. God assured him that he could. God said, I will be with you. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. He was there with Moses. He will be there for you too. So whatever challenges that you're facing, whatever's coming up, or maybe you're seeing something in your life or in your church that where maybe nobody else is handling something that needs to be handled. Why don't you just step up and say, you know, I'm not a great leader. I'm not what somebody else might have been, but I'm willing to give my best to God. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May you be everything that God wants you to be as we move into this next week. Thanks for taking the time and viewing today.